The cowboy bought Apache out of pity, and that night he almost didn't survive. The sun was beginning to sink behind the distant hills, casting long orange shadows over the dusty streets of the small frontier town. The air smelled of dry earth and horses, mixed with the faint scent of baked bread from the town bakery. Tom, a young cowboy with a weathered hat pulled low over his forehead and boots caked in dust, walked slowly down the main street. His eyes were tired but alert, scanning the few people still moving about as they finished their day. The town was quiet, quieter than usual, and that calm made Tom uneasy. He had come here on business, or maybe just to clear his head, but he didn't expect to find anything unusual. As he walked past the wooden buildings with creaking signs swinging in the evening breeze, Tom noticed a small group gathered near the edge of town. Curious, he approached. At the center of the group was an old, crooked auction house, its paint faded and peeling. A few townspeople were murmuring and pointing at something inside. Tom's eyes narrowed. Something about the way they were staring made him pause. He felt drawn in, a mixture of curiosity and an unspoken feeling that he should see what was happening. Inside the auction house, the air smelled of hay, dust, and sweat. Horses of all sizes were penned along the walls, some pacing anxiously, others standing quietly. But one horse caught Tom's attention immediately. He stopped in his tracks. The horse was different. Apache, as the small, faded sign read, was thin and scarred, with a coat that had clearly seen better days. His eyes, dark and wary, flicked toward Tom, and for a moment it felt as though they were looking straight into his soul. Apache was restless, shifting his weight and snorting softly. Most of the people in the room were ignoring him, murmuring among themselves or laughing at the way he paced. The horse was considered useless by many. They saw only the scars, the rough coat, and the uneven gait. They didn't see what Tom saw, a fire in those eyes, a quiet intelligence, and a longing that went beyond fear. Tom's heart ached a little at the sight. Here was an animal abandoned and neglected, labeled as worthless simply because no one had the patience to understand him. Tom moved closer to the pen. Apache shifted back, his ears flattening, but he didn't bolt. There was a tension in the air, a silent conversation between the cowboy and the horse. Tom could feel it. He could feel the horse's fear, but he could also feel something else, something that said if given a chance, Apache could trust, could be loyal, could be more than anyone thought. Tom's hand hovered near the pen, but he didn't touch him. He wasn't ready to force anything. The auctioneer called out the next horse, and the crowd cheered and bid loudly. Tom barely noticed. He kept his eyes on Apache, feeling a strange connection that made him forget about the other horses, the money, even the time. As the bids for other animals climbed, Apache's pen remained empty of attention. Finally, the auctioneer announced that the last horse would be sold at whatever price someone was willing to pay. Tom hesitated. He didn't need another horse. He already had his life, his work, his routines. But something inside him stirred, a mix of pity and recognition. This horse needed someone, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he knew he might be the only one who could help. Without thinking too much about it, Tom stepped forward and called out a bid, just enough to cover what the auctioneer would accept. The room went silent for a moment, and Tom felt every eye in the auction house turn toward him. Some were curious, some mocking, but he ignored them. All that mattered was Apache. The horse's eyes widened slightly, and for a brief second it felt as though he recognized the choice being made, as though he understood that someone had finally noticed him. When the auctioneer confirmed the sale, Tom felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had bought Apache out of pity, yes, but also out of hope. There was a strange weight to the decision, a responsibility he hadn't anticipated. He knew nothing about Apache's past. He didn't know what kind of challenges the horse might present, or how difficult it might be to gain his trust. But the choice was made, and there was no turning back. Tom nodded to the auctioneer, took a deep breath, and began preparing to lead Apache out of the pen. The horse's first steps were cautious, hesitant but steady. He moved as if testing the ground beneath him, measuring whether this new human could be trusted. Tom walked beside him, keeping his voice low and gentle, speaking words meant to soothe, though he wasn't sure if Apache could understand them. Still, the horse responded in subtle ways, a softening of the ears, a slight lowering of the head, a careful step forward. It was progress, small but meaningful, and it made Tom feel both relieved and determined. The walk back to Tom's ranch was quiet, filled with the sound of hooves crunching against the dry dirt road and the occasional gust of wind rustling through the town. Apache remained tense, glancing sideways at every shadow and sound. Tom kept his pace steady, careful not to rush him. He thought about the long night ahead. The ranch was isolated, and the journey from the town would be just long enough for doubt to creep in. What if Apache panicked? What if he bolted? Tom shook the thought away. He had made this choice, and now it was time to see it through. As they neared the edge of the town, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold. The light fell softly on Apache's coat, highlighting the scars and marks that told a story of struggle and survival. Tom could almost read the history in those marks, imagining the hardships this horse had endured, the neglect, the fear, the loneliness. And yet there was also resilience there, strength, a quiet determination that refused to be broken. Tom felt a deep respect for the animal in front of him. He had not just purchased a horse, he had encountered a spirit. When they finally arrived at the ranch, the buildings appeared dark and quiet, the wind whispering through the tall grass. Tom led Apache into the main enclosure, making sure the gates were secure. He laid out fresh water and some feed, watching as Apache approached cautiously. The horse sniffed at the water, then looked at Tom, his gaze wary but curious. Tom knelt down, lowering himself to the horse's level. He reached out slowly, letting Apache see that his hands meant no harm. The horse didn't move, didn't flinch, but didn't step closer either. It was a fragile moment, a balance between fear and trust, and Tom understood that this first night would set the tone for everything to come. Tom cleaned his hands and sat back, leaning against the fence. He could feel the tension in Apache's body, the way he shifted from one hoof to another, ears flicking at every sound. He knew this was going to be a long journey. The horse had been abandoned, mistreated, and ignored for so long that trust would not come easily. But Tom also knew something else. If he was patient, if he was kind, if he didn't give up, there was a chance for something remarkable to grow. A partnership, a friendship, a bond that could transcend fear and past pain. As darkness settled over the ranch, the stars began to appear, scattered like tiny sparks of hope in the vast sky. Tom watched Apache slowly lower his head, taking tentative bites of the feed. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The night stretched ahead, full of uncertainty and challenge, but also full of potential. Tom understood that this first night, this simple act of buying a horse out of pity, was only the beginning. The real test, the real story, would unfold in the days and nights to come. And deep down, he felt ready to face it, one careful step at a time. The night had fully fallen over the ranch, and a quiet stillness had settled across the fields. The only sounds were the soft rustle of the wind through the tall grass and the occasional creak of the wooden fences. Tom, he, sat on the edge of the barn's wooden rail, his hat pulled low and his hands resting on his knees. His eyes never left Apache, who stood at a cautious distance, shifting from hoof to hoof, ears flicking at every sound. The horse had calmed a little since they arrived, but Tom could feel the tension in every line of his body. This night, he realized, would be the first real test of their connection. Tom had thought that buying Apache out of pity was a simple, kind act. But now, faced with the horse's unpredictable reactions, he understood how fragile trust could be. He watched as Apache sniffed the hay in the corner of the pen, his dark eyes scanning the darkness outside the enclosure. The horse flinched at a sound too small for most humans to notice, a falling branch, the cry of a distant owl, but he didn't run. He didn't bolt. That small restraint gave Tom hope. Tom spoke softly, almost in a whisper, though he wasn't sure if the horse understood words. "It's okay, Apache," he said. "You're safe here. You don't have to worry anymore." The horse lifted his head and stared directly at Tom. For a moment their eyes met, and it felt as though the horse was listening, trying to decide if this human was trustworthy. Tom held the gaze, keeping his voice calm and steady, his movements slow and unthreatening. Apache's ears twitched forward slightly, a small but promising sign. As the night grew darker, Tom realized that Apache was more than just nervous. He was alert, highly aware of his surroundings. Every shadow, every whisper of wind seemed to make him tense. Tom understood why people in town had labeled him dangerous. Not because he was mean, but because he was cautious. He had learned from life to expect the unexpected, and that caution had become part of who he was. Tom admired that, even as he worried about what the night might bring. Tom decided to sit closer, keeping low so he wouldn't seem threatening. He reached slowly toward Apache, but the horse stepped back, ears pinned slightly. Tom froze, understanding the warning. "I'm not going to hurt you," he murmured. He stayed still, letting Apache decide when to come closer. Minutes passed and the night deepened. Stars appeared, twinkling softly in the sky, while the moon cast a pale glow over the ranch. The air smelled of fresh hay, earth, and the faint sweetness of wildflowers growing at the edge of the field. Tom breathed in slowly, using the calm night to steady both his own nerves and, he hoped, Apache's. After a long silence, Apache inched closer, sniffing at Tom's boots. The movement was careful and deliberate, showing trust but not complete comfort. Tom remained still, letting the horse explore, speaking soft words to soothe him. "Good boy, that's it, easy now." The horse finally lowered his head, touching Tom's hand gently with his nose. A smile crept onto Tom's face. It was a small victory, but one that filled him with relief and hope. He knew that this was the first step toward a real bond, something stronger than simple ownership or pity. Hours passed in this quiet rhythm. Tom fed Apache some oats from his hand, letting the horse nibble slowly while he remained still and patient. Every movement was deliberate, every word calm. Tom could feel the subtle shift in Apache's behavior. The horse relaxed ever so slightly, his muscles easing, his ears no longer pinned in constant alert. It was a small but meaningful sign of trust. Tom leaned back, letting the night and the soft glow of the moon wash over them. He felt a strange sense of peace, though he knew this calm was fragile. Suddenly, a soft sound caught Apache's attention. A branch broke somewhere in the darkness and the horse flinched. He moved back quickly, eyes wide, muscles tense. Tom held out his hand and spoke in a gentle, steady voice. "It's okay, Apache. It's just the wind. You're safe." He kept his movements slow, allowing the horse to see he meant no harm. Gradually, Apache relaxed, his breathing steadying, though his gaze never left the shadows beyond the fence. Tom realized that patience was the key, not forcing trust but earning it with quiet consistency. The night air grew colder, and Tom noticed the horse shivering slightly. He stepped closer, keeping his movements careful, and laid a blanket over Apache's back. The horse stiffened for a moment, then allowed the warmth to settle over him. Tom murmured softly, rubbing the blanket to make it comfortable. It was a simple gesture, but one that mattered. Apache was learning that this human cared, and Tom was learning just how deep the bond with an animal could go when built on understanding, not dominance. Hours turned slowly into late night. Tom stayed near Apache, keeping a watchful eye while allowing him to move freely within the pen. He thought about the irony of the situation. He had bought Apache out of pity, thinking he was rescuing the horse from misery, yet it was clear that Apache was teaching him lessons too. Patience, empathy, and respect for another being's fears and strengths were coming alive in the quiet hours of this first night. Tom felt a deep gratitude for the horse's resilience and the opportunity to learn from him. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, Apache finally lowered his head to rest, his body relaxing almost completely. Tom breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that the horse had survived the first night without incident. He knew that the bond they were forming was fragile, but it was real. This night had tested both of them. The horse had tested Tom's patience and understanding, and Tom had tested his own ability to remain calm, kind, and steadfast. Both had passed, and in that quiet, silver-lit ranch, a small connection had been forged. Tom settled on the ground, leaning against the fence and watching the horse breathe slowly, the rise and fall of his chest a steady rhythm against the calm night. He reflected on the day, on the auction house, and on the moment he had made the decision to buy Apache. He understood now that it had not been pity alone that guided him, but recognition of the horse's spirit, and recognition of a kindred loneliness that both of them carried. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "We'll get through this together, Apache." Step by step. The horse lifted his head slightly, as if acknowledging the words. It was not a dramatic gesture, but it was enough to confirm what Tom felt deep inside. A partnership had begun, one built on respect, patience, and a willingness to understand each other. The night stretched on, calm and quiet, the stars twinkling like tiny beacons of hope in the endless sky. Tom stayed vigilant, but he felt a confidence he had not expected. He had survived the first real test, and so had Apache. Both had faced fear, uncertainty, and the unknown. And both had learned that trust, once given even in the smallest measure, could become the foundation for something stronger than either could have imagined. By the time the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, painting the sky in pale pinks and soft blues, Apache was standing calmly, his head lowered, breathing steady. Tom watched him for a long moment, a quiet smile on his face. The night had almost tested him to the edge, but it had also brought him closer to the horse, laying the groundwork for a journey that would teach patience, courage, and the quiet power of empathy. Tom finally leaned back against the fence and closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting the peace of the early morning wash over him. He knew the coming days would bring more challenges, but he felt ready. Apache was not just a horse bought out of pity. He was a teacher, a companion, and a mirror of resilience. And Tom was determined to honor that connection, one careful, patient step at a time. The morning sun spilled across the ranch, painting the fields in shades of gold and green. He stretched his arms and yawned, the long night with Apache still fresh in his mind. He looked over at the horse, who was standing quietly near the fence, ears flicking at the sounds of birds and the distant wind. Apache, he had changed slightly since the previous night. There was a subtle calmness in his eyes, a small softness that hadn't been there before. Tom felt a flicker of hope. It was a new beginning, and both of them were learning together. After breakfast, Tom led Apache out of the enclosure into the small paddock he had prepared for the horse. The morning air was cool and fresh, and the gentle light of the rising sun made the grass shimmer as dew clung to each blade. Apache hesitated at the gate, lifting his head and taking in the new space. Tom stayed a few steps behind, giving him room to explore. "Take your time," he said softly. "There's no rush." The horse shifted one hoof, sniffed the air, and slowly stepped forward. Step by step, he began to explore, his movements cautious but curious. Tom watched closely, noticing every small sign of Apache's behavior. When the horse's ears twitched forward, or he lowered his head to sniff the ground, it meant he was comfortable enough to investigate. When he took a sudden glance around, it meant he was alert but not panicked. Tom began to understand the subtle language of this horse, the ways he communicated without words. He realized that building trust would take patience, observation, and care. It would not happen overnight, but he was ready to invest in it. For the next few hours, Tom and Apache walked slowly around the paddock. Tom spoke softly all the time, not giving commands but offering reassurance. "Good boy, easy now, that's it." Each word was meant to soothe, not command. Apache began to respond, his movements less tense, his steps more relaxed. Tom felt a thrill of satisfaction. It was a quiet triumph, but a triumph nonetheless. He realized that the true work wasn't about riding or training yet. It was about understanding each other, creating a bond that would last. By mid-morning, Tom decided to introduce some gentle exercises. He placed a few small objects on the ground, a soft blanket, a bucket of water, and a simple wooden pole. He wanted Apache to get used to new sights and textures, to explore without fear. At first, the horse was hesitant, stepping back at each new object. But Tom stayed calm, never forcing him. He allowed Apache to investigate at his own pace. The horse sniffed the blanket, tapped it lightly with a hoof, then nudged it with his nose. Tom smiled. "That's it." "Very good." Small steps, small victories, but they were signs that progress was happening. The day passed slowly, but in a way that strengthened the connection between man and horse. Tom shared bits of his lunch with Apache, placing carrots and oats in the horse's feed bucket. Apache accepted them cautiously at first, then more confidently, seeming to understand that this human was kind and meant no harm. Tom chuckled softly. "You're a smart one, aren't you?" he said. Apache flicked his ears in response, a subtle acknowledgement. By afternoon, Tom decided to take Apache on a short walk beyond the paddock. He led the horse down a narrow dirt path, lined with wildflowers and tall grass. Apache was alert, pausing often to sniff the air or glance around at the new surroundings. Tom let him lead at his own pace, only offering gentle guidance when the path turned slightly steeper or uneven. The horse responded well, showing growing confidence and trust. Tom realized that Apache wasn't just following him. He was learning to feel safe with him, to accept him as a companion. They stopped near a small creek that ran along the edge of the property. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and the sound of it flowing over the stones was soothing. Apache hesitated at first, lifting a hoof and watching the water closely. Tom knelt beside him, his hand resting lightly on the horse's shoulder. "It's okay," he whispered. "Nothing to be afraid of." Slowly, Apache lowered his head and stepped forward, letting his hooves touch the cool water. He moved carefully, then, encouraged by Tom's calm presence, began to walk along the creek's edge. It was a moment of quiet triumph, a sign that the trust between them was growing stronger by the hour. After they returned to the ranch, Tom decided to groom Apache. He brought out a soft brush and began to run it gently over the horse's coat. At first, Apache twitched slightly at the touch, but Tom kept his movements slow and steady. "Easy, that's it," he murmured. As the minutes passed, the horse relaxed, leaning into the brush slightly, closing his eyes in quiet enjoyment. Tom realized that grooming was more than just cleaning. It was another way to build trust, another way to communicate care and respect. The afternoon stretched into evening, and Tom decided to let Apache rest in the paddock while he prepared the barn for the night. He moved quietly, mindful of the horse's presence, keeping his voice calm and his movements predictable. Apache grazed quietly, occasionally lifting his head to look toward Tom. Each glance, each subtle gesture, reinforced the growing bond between them. Tom felt a sense of satisfaction he had not expected, a quiet joy in watching this once-neglected horse begin to relax and respond to kindness. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, Tom led Apache back toward the barn. The horse walked calmly, his steps steady, his posture relaxed. Tom felt a sense of pride. It wasn't about riding yet or showing skill. It was about connection, patience, and mutual respect. He had begun to earn Apache's trust, and in return, Apache was teaching him about gentleness, observation, and the power of empathy. That evening, Tom set up a soft bed of hay in the stall for Apache. He brought water and fresh feed, speaking softly all the while. The horse moved in slowly, sniffing the hay, then settling down to eat. Tom watched him for a long moment, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The journey was far from over, but the first true signs of trust and companionship were there. Apache's eyes met Tom's, dark and calm, as if acknowledging the effort and care that had gone into the day. As night fell, Tom sat outside the stall, leaning against the fence. The stars twinkled above, and the ranch was quiet except for the soft sounds of the horse breathing and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. He reflected on the day, the small victories, the moments of hesitation, the growing understanding between them. He realized that this bond was something special, something that went beyond simple ownership or obligation. Apache had become more than a horse to him. He was a companion, a teacher, a mirror reflecting patience, courage, and resilience. Tom whispered softly to Apache, "Tomorrow we'll explore a little more, step by step together." The horse lifted his head slightly, flicking his ears in acknowledgement, then lowered it again to rest. It was a small gesture, but to Tom, it meant everything. The horse was learning to trust him, and he was learning to understand the horse. The first night had been a test of patience and calm. Today had been a step forward, a day of understanding, gentle guidance, and mutual respect. As he finally stood up and walked back toward his small cabin, Tom felt a sense of calm he hadn't felt in a long time. The journey ahead would have challenges, but it also had promise. With patience, kindness, and steady guidance, he could help Apache thrive. And in return, Apache was teaching him about resilience, trust, and the quiet joys of connecting with another being in a way that was honest and pure. Tom knew that the road ahead was long. Trust had to be earned, step by step. But as he looked back at Apache, who was calmly grazing under the soft light of the moon, he felt certain that they could face it together. One day, one small step at a time, they would grow stronger, not just as cowboy and horse, but as friends, companions, and partners in a journey that neither had expected, but both needed. The morning was crisp and full of promise, the kind of morning that made the world seem wide and full of possibility. He stepped outside his cabin, stretching and breathing in the fresh air. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, and bathed in the soft gold of early sunlight. Apache, he was already awake, standing near the fence and watching Tom with alert, intelligent eyes. Over the past few days, the horse had begun to move with a quiet confidence, exploring the paddock and responding to Tom's calm guidance. But today, Tom felt it was time to take their partnership a step further. "Come on, Apache," Tom said softly, holding the lead rope loosely. "Let's see what's beyond the creek today." The horse flicked his ears forward, snorted softly, and stepped toward him. Tom smiled. Apache's growing willingness to follow him showed how far their trust had come. What had begun as caution and fear was slowly turning into curiosity, the kind of curiosity that opens doors to adventure. Tom felt a thrill of anticipation, though he knew that today would test not just the horse, but himself as well. They walked along the dirt path leading to the small creek that marked the edge of the ranch property. The water sparkled in the sunlight, the gentle rush of it soothing both horse and man. Apache stopped occasionally, sniffing at the air, glancing around and testing the ground with careful steps. Tom let him take the lead, offering guidance only when the terrain grew rough or uneven. Step by step, the horse began to move with more confidence, ears forward, muscles relaxed. Tom marveled at the progress. They had come so far in so little time, yet he knew the journey was far from over. As they rounded the bend by the creek, a small group of wild deer appeared in the distance. Apache froze, eyes wide, muscles tensed. Tom felt his own heartbeat quicken. This was the moment he had been anticipating, the first real test of Apache's composure in the face of an unexpected challenge. He spoke softly, his voice calm and even. "It's okay, Apache. Look at me. They're just deer. Nothing to worry about." Slowly, carefully, he guided the horse's attention back to him. At first, Apache's body remained tense, but gradually he relaxed, taking a tentative step forward. They continued along the path, the deer disappearing into the forest. Apache's steps grew more confident with each passing moment, his trust in Tom guiding him through moments of hesitation. Tom noticed the subtle changes in his posture, the way his ears flicked forward, the soft lift of his tail, signs that the horse was learning not just to follow, but to feel secure while exploring new situations. Tom felt a deep sense of pride. This was no longer just a horse he had bought out of pity. This was a companion, a partner, a friend. By late morning, they had reached a small meadow beyond the creek, filled with wildflowers and soft grass. Tom dismounted and let Apache roam freely, keeping a loose rein on the lead rope. The horse moved with a careful curiosity, sniffing at the flowers, lifting his head to look at the sky, and occasionally glancing back at Tom as if to say, "I'm okay and I trust you." Tom smiled, walking slowly beside him. "Good boy, Apache, that's it. Take your time." The gentle rhythm of walking together, exploring and discovering, was becoming a quiet ritual, a way for them to learn about each other without fear or pressure. As they wandered through the meadow, Tom noticed a fallen tree blocking part of the path. Apache stopped abruptly, ears flicking, eyes wide. Tom approached slowly. "Easy, it's okay," he whispered. He guided Apache around the obstacle, showing him that he would be there to help, not to push or force. The horse followed cautiously, stepping around the trunk, then slowly moving past it, muscles relaxing once he saw the path was safe. Tom felt a surge of pride, another small victory, another sign of growing trust. After navigating the obstacle, they continued toward the forest edge. The shade of the trees offered a welcome relief from the heat of the sun, and Apache moved confidently among the dappled light and shadow. Tom noticed how aware the horse had become, responding to subtle changes in terrain, noticing every sound, every rustle in the leaves. It was clear that Apache was learning to feel secure in his surroundings, and Tom realized that he, too, was learning to read the horse in ways he hadn't imagined. Around midday, they came to a small clearing where a fallen branch formed a natural bridge over a tiny stream. Apache hesitated, lifting a hoof and looking uncertain. Tom stopped, speaking softly, "It's okay, just one step at a time." The horse sniffed the branch, shifted his weight carefully, and then, slowly and deliberately, stepped across. Tom followed beside him, steadying him with a gentle touch when necessary. When Apache reached the other side, he lifted his head and snorted softly, as if proud of himself. Tom laughed quietly. "Good boy, you did it." The sense of accomplishment was mutual. As they rested by the stream, Tom offered Apache a few oats, holding them in his hand. The horse accepted them gently, standing close and relaxed. Tom reached up to scratch behind his ears, a small gesture that had become a daily part of their routine. Apache leaned into it slightly, a quiet acknowledgement of the growing bond. The trust that had taken days to nurture was beginning to show in moments like this, moments of calm, gentle connection that spoke louder than words ever could. After their rest, Tom decided to head back toward the ranch, but he noticed that the sky was beginning to darken with clouds rolling in from the west. A light breeze picked up, and the smell of rain hung in the air. Apache stopped and raised his head, sniffing, sensing the change. Tom realized this could be another test. A sudden change in weather could unsettle a less confident horse. He spoke calmly. "It's okay, Apache. We'll take it slow." The horse responded, moving with steady steps beside him, ears forward, muscles relaxed but ready. They walked briskly as the first drops of rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. The sound of rain hitting the leaves and ground was soothing, and Apache seemed to find comfort in the rhythm, following Tom's lead without panic. They reached the safety of the paddock just as the rain began to pour steadily. Tom helped Apache back into the stall, brushing water off his coat and offering fresh hay and water. The horse moved calmly, no signs of fear, no hesitance, proof that their bond had strengthened through shared experience. That evening, as the rain continued outside, Tom sat beside the stall watching Apache settle in. He reflected on the day, the small obstacles, the moments of hesitation, and the steps of courage the horse had taken. Every challenge had been a chance to grow together, to learn about patience, trust, and understanding. Apache was no longer just a rescued horse. He was a partner in exploration, an ally in navigating both the physical world and the unspoken world of connection and care. Tom spoke softly to Apache. "We've done well today, haven't we? Step by step, we're learning together." The horse lifted his head slightly, meeting Tom's gaze, then lowered it again in a quiet, peaceful gesture. Tom realized that this was more than a routine. It was a pattern of life, a rhythm they were creating together. Each day, each small success, each obstacle overcome, was building a foundation of trust that would last far beyond the limits of the ranch. As night fell, the rain softened to a gentle drizzle, the sound of water trickling over the ground filling the barn with a calming melody. Apache lay down briefly in the soft hay, a rare sign of full relaxation, while Tom remained close by. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction and calm. The bond they were nurturing was not forced, not hurried. It was patient, steady, and mutual. This was a relationship built on understanding, respect, and shared experiences. Before turning in for the night, Tom stood outside the barn, watching the rain glisten on the fences and trees. He thought about how far they had come, from a horse purchased out of pity to a companion capable of trust and courage. He understood now that Apache had not only faced tests in the world around him, but also in learning to trust and follow another being. And in guiding him, Tom had learned more about patience, empathy, and resilience than he had in years of living alone on the ranch. As the night settled and the rain slowed to soft drops, Tom whispered to Apache, "Tomorrow, we'll see what new adventures await. Step by step, we'll face them together." The horse shifted slightly, ears forward, eyes calm, as if acknowledging the promise of tomorrow. Tom knew that challenges would continue to come, but he also knew that together, they could face them, calmly, patiently, and with a growing bond that would guide them through anything. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, spilling golden light across the fields and illuminating the soft mist that hovered over the grass. He stepped out of his cabin, stretching his arms and taking a deep breath of the fresh morning air. The world felt calm and full of possibilities. Apache, he stood nearby, ears pricked, eyes bright and alert. Over the past several days, their bond had grown stronger with every gentle touch, every shared moment, and every small adventure. Now, as Tom approached, he felt a sense of anticipation. Today would be a day unlike any other, a day to see just how far they had come together. Tom walked toward Apache, holding the lead rope loosely in one hand. "Ready for a walk, Apache?" he asked softly. The horse lifted his head, snorted gently, and stepped forward, muscles relaxed and confident. It was a remarkable change from the wary, tense animal Tom had first brought home. Apache's movements were deliberate but unafraid, his trust in Tom evident in every step. The cowboy smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that went beyond simple satisfaction. This horse was no longer just a companion. He was a friend, a partner, and a teacher in his own quiet way. They began walking toward the far side of the ranch, the path winding through fields dotted with wildflowers and tall grass. Apache moved with a calm curiosity, stopping occasionally to sniff the air or examine a new plant. Tom allowed him to explore, following at his side and speaking in soft, encouraging words. "Good boy, easy, take your time." Each gentle word reinforced the trust between them, and Apache responded with subtle gestures, a lowered head, a soft flick of the ears, a steady step closer to Tom whenever he paused. As they approached a small grove of trees near the edge of the property, Tom noticed a slight incline that led to a clearing with a view of the valley below. He had not shown Apache this part of the ranch before, and he wondered how the horse would react. He spoke softly, keeping his tone calm and inviting. "Come on, Apache, let's see what's over there. Nothing to be afraid of." The horse hesitated for a moment, lifting a hoof and scanning the path ahead, but then he stepped forward with confidence, trusting Tom to guide him. The climb was slow, careful, but Apache moved steadily, muscles rippling under his coat as he navigated the gentle slope. Tom walked beside him, attentive to every movement, ready to offer reassurance if needed. The bond between them had grown to the point where Tom didn't have to give commands. Apache responded naturally to his presence, his calm voice, and his gentle guidance. It was a partnership built on understanding, patience, and respect, qualities that had taken days to nurture but would now carry them forward. When they reached the clearing, the view took Tom's breath away. Below stretched the valley, dotted with trees, streams, and distant hills that rolled toward the horizon. Apache lifted his head, eyes wide and alert, nostrils flaring slightly as he took in the sights and scents of this new place. Tom smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride and wonder. "Look at this, Apache, beautiful, isn't it?" The horse's ears flicked toward him, and then he turned his gaze back to the valley, calm but attentive. In that moment, Tom felt the fullness of their journey. The horse he had bought out of pity had grown into a partner who could face the world with him. They spent the morning exploring the clearing, moving slowly and deliberately. Apache's confidence continued to grow as he navigated fallen branches, soft patches of earth, and shallow streams. Tom kept his tone gentle, offering reassurance when needed and quiet praise when Apache approached something new without hesitation. "Good boy, you're doing so well." Each word, each touch, each shared glance strengthened the bond between them. By now, Tom understood that the journey was not just about teaching the horse to trust. It was about learning to trust himself, to remain calm and patient, and to listen in ways he had never done before. Around midday, Tom decided to let Apache rest near the edge of the clearing, where the grass was soft and the sun warm. He sat on the ground, leaning against a large rock, while Apache grazed nearby. The horse occasionally lifted his head to glance at Tom, ears flicking forward in quiet acknowledgement. Tom reached out and scratched gently behind Apache's ears, feeling the softness of his coat and the warmth of his body. "You've come so far, Apache," he murmured. "I'm proud of you, boy." Apache leaned slightly into the gesture, a subtle but unmistakable sign of trust and affection. After their rest, Tom suggested a gentle exercise. He placed a few small obstacles on the ground, a fallen log, a soft blanket, and a shallow ditch, designed not to challenge Apache too much, but to encourage him to think and move confidently. The horse approached each obstacle with caution at first, then gradually with curiosity, testing the boundaries and discovering that Tom's calm presence made everything safe. Step by step, obstacle by obstacle, Apache moved forward, each success reinforcing the trust and partnership between them. By late afternoon, Tom decided it was time to return to the ranch. The walk back was slow, deliberate, and filled with a quiet sense of accomplishment. Apache moved with ease, confident and relaxed, ears forward, muscles flowing smoothly as he followed the familiar path home. Tom walked beside him, occasionally speaking soft words of encouragement and praise. "Good boy, easy, you're amazing." Apache responded in his own subtle ways, a gentle nuzzle, a flick of his tail, a soft snort. The connection between them was clear, unspoken, and powerful. When they finally reached the ranch, Tom prepared a comfortable stall for Apache, laying out fresh hay and water. The horse entered calmly, stepping carefully onto the soft bedding. Tom stayed close, brushing the horse's coat gently and speaking softly all the while. Apache stood still, relaxed, and even lowered his head slightly, a gesture of quiet trust. Tom smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and joy. The journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every step. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and hesitation, and had grown stronger together. As evening approached, Tom stepped outside the barn, watching Apache settle in. The ranch was quiet, filled with the soft sounds of the wind through the trees and the occasional call of a distant bird. He reflected on the days that had passed, the first night of uncertainty, the slow building of trust, the small victories, and the moments of courage. Apache had changed profoundly, but so had he. He had learned patience, empathy, and the power of connection in ways he never imagined. Tom walked slowly back to the cabin, pausing to look at Apache one last time. The horse stood calmly in the stall, eyes soft and calm, a picture of contentment and trust. Tom realized that the horse he had bought out of pity had become much more than a companion. He was a friend, a partner, and a teacher. Apache had taught him about patience, courage, and the quiet strength of trust. And in return, Tom had given the horse something equally valuable: kindness, care, and a chance to thrive. That night, as the stars twinkled above the ranch and a gentle breeze rustled the trees, Tom sat quietly outside, listening to the soft breathing of Apache in the barn. He thought about the journey they had shared, the fears faced, the trust earned, and the moments of quiet triumph. It was a partnership built slowly, step by step, but one that would last a lifetime. Tom whispered softly to the night, "We did it, Apache, together." The horse, hearing the familiar voice, lifted his head slightly and snorted softly, a sound of acknowledgement and quiet contentment. Tom smiled, feeling a warmth in his heart that went far beyond words. He had begun this journey thinking he was rescuing a lonely, neglected horse, but in truth, Apache had rescued a part of him too, the part that had forgotten patience, trust, and quiet joy. Together they had created something extraordinary, a bond unbroken, strong, and full of mutual respect. As the night deepened, Tom stood and walked back toward his cabin, glancing once more at the barn. Apache was calm, peaceful, and settled. The journey had brought challenges, but it had also brought growth, understanding, and a friendship that neither man nor horse would forget. Tom knew that more adventures would come, more tests of patience and courage, but he also knew that together, they could face anything. In the quiet of that star-filled night, Tom reflected on the lesson of their time together. That trust is earned slowly, that patience is stronger than force, and that kindness can transform even the most fearful heart. Apache had started as a horse bought out of pity, but he had become so much more: a companion, a confidant, and a reminder of the quiet, enduring power of connection. Tom finally turned into his cabin, feeling a deep sense of peace. The ranch was calm, the stars above twinkling in gentle rhythm, and the horse he had once saved from neglect was now a source of joy, pride, and inspiration. As he closed the door behind him, he knew that the journey with Apache was far from over, but it would continue, step by step, day by day, with trust, patience, and friendship guiding them every step of the way. And in that simple, peaceful moment, cowboy and horse rested together, not just as human and animal, but as friends who had found each other, learned from each other, and would face the future together, side by side, heart to heart.